A key for the uninitiated. Mr. Withers, Rittspaugh and Spangler were employees at Ford's Theater in April 1865. Hyas and Stenorhynchus are spider crabs. John Wilkes Booth was a vacuum tube salesman. Story begins now. Hyas and Stenorhynchus are just 1.5 inches into the alley. They recognize Mr. Withers. Note his small mandibles. Stenorhynchus jumped. A revolver startled him. He is wearing a gown and a long dress made of materials found in his natural surroundings. See his large claws. Shall we return to the orchestra? Stenorhynchus is slender in the nose, as is Mr. Withers. Both are evenly covered in algae. Each dresses in a style that is attached to their spines. Mr. Withers did not appear like a maniac, even though he jumped from a balcony. He waved threateningly. At the door, a dagger in hand, it was often difficult to tell if Hyas or Stenorhynchus was the more striking. See the ravishing shell. Here we see Stenorhynchus blending into John Wilkes Booth. He ran directly from his sockets, and his eyes seemed to dart into the alley. His long legs would have it out with his disheveled hair. With a crack, they greet each other. Mr. Withers had the president's box, and all was quiet instantly, like crabs covered with sponges. The horse was moving in invitation to a close-up of Stenorhynchus out for a walk. He ran towards Mr. Withers and slashed at his coat, vest, and underclothing. So it's off to the police station. The weapon penetrated his back more discreetly as the seaweed is just beginning to rise visibly like a praying Buddha, and cut through his circle in a waltz that concealed sinister motives. With a quick, agitated blow, Mr. Withers' arm wrestling enthusiasts caught sight of the clumsy horse held by the assassin as he struck again. Recognizing that, like all crustaceans, he described the moment as close relations with head down. See him point to a bunch of seaweed underneath. Hyas covered his claws. It was easy to talk to Peanut John. The moon rose over distant seas. Hyas had vertical spikes, the latest of which conjures up grotesque arms. It's taken that long, and so he lives in that state. His mandibles remain in motion. His legs, over 6 feet long, exit into the alley. There are cilia 1/100th millimeter long that might be rocks. The horse conveys food particles to Rittspaugh, who shoots forward and checks out F Street. The assassin asks what he meant. Extreme darkness crossing over his head almost struck him, saying, "Don't say which worm had a face like a tube." Following that classic way, he went. Rittspaugh brought him around in reach of the ciliae. Rittspaugh could extrude or retract his branchii. Stenorhynchus sometimes nibbles in the direction that appears to be headed for Anacostia Bridge. Spangler replies in a spiral movement. The respiratory plume in the worm's mouth ran up the alley where it encountered Spangler's mouth. Here we see caresses between a spirograph and a Stenorhynchus. Spangler flees, rubbing his left flank as if the rider had been a Japanese warrior. Hyas's horse's feet rattle violently because the worm is 6 inches to the left. On the horse's head is a long plume, zooming closer and closer. See Spirograph's branchii.